Hello and welcome to our very exciting and somewhat confusing, but our wonderful webinar on climate change and health. It's been a really amazing week for us. Last week, as you know, we hosted a pretty amazing webinar around renewable energy, and this week we're on to climate change and health with some of, and I'm not even kidding by this, some of the leaders in the field, as you can see in the screens below that I'm now navigating through. We have an all-star cast here, and for the first time in this series also, we've decided to bring in some of our climate trackers who are kind of particularly interested in this field, and I'm going to get them to introduce themselves quite soon. But for now, I'm so glad that you've joined us, and hope that the small delay that we've had wasn't too much for you, and I hope that you're still with us and excited. Grab yourself some food, grab yourself some drinks, and get ready for what's going to be an action-packed show here today. Turn off Game of Thrones reruns and turn up the Climate Tracker webinar. That's right, I said it. So anyway, what we are talking about today is climate change and health, and as I've said, we have an all-star cast here. If you want to engage with the cast, feel free to write any questions you like on the Google Hangout page. We also have the Facebook page, so there's an event page on Facebook, the threat of climate change and health. There's also the Climate Tracker 2015 Facebook group. And finally, if you want to tweet at us, you can tweet at #ClimateTracker, #ClimateTracker. Yes, I did graduate with a master's in spelling. So, thank you so much for joining us, and get ready for what's going to be fun-filled and also a little bit scary health update on how health relates to climate change, and all about how climate change is not only potentially the biggest threat to health in the 21st century, but also may be our greatest opportunity. But without further ado, as I've given plenty so far, I'll let some of the all-star cast introduce themselves. And from right to left, it looks like I've got Nick Watts on the right. And Nick, how about you introduce yourself to those watching online?
Sure. Hi, my name's Nick. I'm, as my accent may or may not portray, Australian. I split my time between 3 different groups in health and climate change. Partly running the negotiations for the World Health Organization, for the UNFCCC. Partly directing the Global Climate and Health Alliance, and partly as the director of the 2015 Lancet Commission on Health and Climate Change. Glad to be here.
Gee, it sounds like you must have had a pretty busy year. Next on my screen, I see Nalini. Nalini, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How is everyone doing?
Yeah, great. And where are you joining us from, and why are you kind of involved in this call?
Okay, well, I'm actually from Kingston, Jamaica, and I'm actually a climate tracker here. So I'm from the Caribbean, and I'm here because we realized that climate change has really impacted us on a health basis, and it has really caused a lot of problems here, and it's continuing to cause a lot of problems, especially in regards to diseases. So a lot of my work here involves risk management and climate change mitigation in regards to reducing the impacts of climate change on health and wellness, and especially on the energy sector.
For sure, and I don't want to kind of preempt what Nalini might be saying later on, but she's definitely going to update you with some pretty exciting news in terms of some local action that's going on in Jamaica. Now, next on my list, it looks like we have Catherine. Now, Catherine, do you have as easily an identifiable accent, or are you kind of somewhere in the middle of accent world?
I'm from the Midwest, but living in Washington, D.C., and I'm the Executive Director of Physicians for Social Responsibility, which is very concerned about climate change and its impact on health, and working to stop the causes, because we need to keep our health, and we aren't going to do that on our current path.
I've got a bit of a pause in screen, but if you can still, last on my list, to the far left, is and Anjali, you're joining us from another corner of the world. Where are you right now?
Yeah, I'm in Tokyo now. Hello, could you hear me? Hello?
Yes, go ahead and tell us what you do.
Yeah, okay. So I'm actually a doctor too, like you, but I'm just a fresh graduate. Yeah, so right after taking medicine, sorry? Okay, so right after taking medicine, I am studying now here in University of Tokyo under the program of Sustainability, Science, Global Leadership Initiative. So my interests now include disaster, mental health, and planetary medicine, or geophysiology, basically. That's it.
Wow, planetary medicine. Are you really planning to keep the planet well medicated?
I hope so. But they call it planetary health now, and it's funny because I have this friend, he was like, oh, planetary medicine, how is Uranus doing now? So he's like, okay, I'm just gonna go for Earth, right? Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that's a number of people laughing right now. Great one. But finally on the panel, I've skipped someone, and I've personally skipped someone because I shouldn't introduce him with anything but glorious praise. But in the middle of the panels on the bottom, we have Joshua Wiese, who's the director of the Adopt a Negotiator program, and I'm so glad that he's able to kind of join us on this webinar this morning. How are you?
Hello, thanks, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here and be part of this, share this research and explore the climate health nexus with you guys. I'm more here as a listener, but also as a backup in case Chris' connection breaks. So if Chris' face freezes, hopefully I can jump in and help continue the conversation. On that note, though, Chris, feel free to take it away.
I will do, and I've finished my daily prayers to the gods of the internet today, so I'm hoping that they're going to pay off for us. But it's always great to have a backup, and you're much more than a backup, so it's wonderful to have you here. I might jump into the real detail of everything. So Catherine, you mentioned you're the executive director of a group called the Physicians for Social Responsibility. Now, you kind of touched on the group a little bit, and you touched on why you're so interested in climate change. But I was wondering, to start off our webinar today, what is the basic relationship between climate change and health, and is there really that strong a link? Catherine, you might just want to hit the mute button to unmute yourself, ironically.
Got it.
All right.
I don't know if you can share my screen, but what I'd like to do in just 1 minute is to have people step back and think about what health is. And health, we often think about health as having access to healthcare providers and being treated when we're sick, but there's a lot of components that go into health. The first is that we have to have food. If we don't have food, we are malnourished, we're more likely to be sick, and we can die from lack of it. We have to have housing. We have to be safe from the elements. And as I don't know if you've shared my screen, but these disasters ruin infrastructure and housing and make people unhealthy. The third thing we need, of course, is clean air. And climate change is worsening our air with increase in ozone and, of course, burning fossil fuels. Of course, we have to have clean water. We know when we have clean water, we cut infant mortality by over 50%. And lastly, we have to have infrastructure. Electricity runs our hospitals, our clinics. It runs our refrigerators to keep our food safe. It runs water pumps. So without that, we don't have health. Have you shared my screen?
Catherine, we don't have control over your computer. You can either send us the slides and I can share them on my screen, or there is a share screen button on your top right, which you could try.
All right, I'll just. The Lancet Commission recently put out a report that showed the interconnections between climate change, which include, heat waves, drought, sea level rise, extreme weather events, and flooding. And these impact by affecting our air, our water, the availability of clean water, and all the things that I just mentioned. And that results in increase in cardiovascular disease, pulmonary disease, infectious diseases, particularly those borne by insects. It impacts basically our overall health. And so I think that these extreme weather events superimposed especially on those people who don't have the money or the resources to rebuild and build their communities and rebuild their homes are very much at risk and will die or be displaced by climate change. That's it.
I mean, you're definitely right there, and having lived for a short time of my life in some of those communities that may not necessarily have, I guess, running electricity or running water, I can definitely relate to the kind of the basic health threats that they pose on a day-to-day basis. But I just kind of, I wonder if I can play devil's advocate here, and as a doctor, there are, a whole host of health issues right now. We were all shocked at kind of the Ebola crisis that was happening over the new year and last year, and I have to ask, aren't there more important issues facing global health right now?
I think that climate change ranks right up there. I think that if you look at the extreme drought in California, the drought of 2012 in the Midwest that raised food prices, the drought in California has resulted in many fields not being planted. The heat wave in India, in Pakistan, these are all impacts of climate change, and people are dying, or they're unable to afford food and becoming malnourished because of it. In California, the wells are running dry. The wells that are still present have a higher concentration of arsenic because there's more concentration as the water gets lower of toxics that might be present in the water. So there's just so many manifestations and impacts of climate change on our health that people don't connect the dots to, and we really need to.
Definitely, and it sounds like you're not only thinking about the short term, but also the long term impacts, and I guess the combination of those makes it kind of also an even more like deadly, I guess, element going on, and a deadly kind of, effect that we all going to have to deal with, and kind of, if you can just kind of very quickly illustrate, what do you think, if you had to label a thing, what do you think is the biggest threat that the scariest impact of health that climate change could possibly bring?
Wow. Possibly conflict. And that isn't going to be an outcome of so people are not going to have the amount of water they need. They're not going to have the food that they need. And so if for example, Syria, that was a middle-class country, and this particular country was able to feed its own people. It had a severe drought for 4 years, and the government did not respond with providing water and food for the people of its country. And so people moved to the cities. They needed jobs, they needed food, they needed money, and a civil war resulted. And now there are millions of refugees from Syria and even within Syria that are not able to care for themselves. So I think that we don't necessarily feel that here in the United States, but we certainly had our own diaspora of refugees from Hurricane Katrina, people who lost everything, and many are not able to recover. So I think that the impacts of these extreme weather events on our basic ability to care for ourselves is really the biggest impact on health.
Well, I don't know if that scared those watching online, but it certainly does me. And to think that even if part of what's going on in Syria is linked at all to climate change, that's certainly something that you know that was definitely going to kind of give me a thought tonight, and definitely not something I considered. And for those of you who are still watching or who may have just joined, if you do want to ask any questions of Catherine, or if you have any comments on anything she just said, feel free to use the hashtag #ClimateTracker, or to write a comment on our or the Google Hangout page, and we'll be sure to kind of have a look at that and maybe bring it up later on, and maybe redirect your questions and your comments to Catherine later on. I wonder if I can just pass to Nick right now. And Nick, you mentioned that you wear 3 hats, and I'm sure you probably wear even more. One of those hats is Director of the Global Climate and Health Alliance. And that gives me the feeling that you probably work with a lot of health practitioners who are equally worried, equally as Catherine, I'm sure, about the impacts of climate change. Is that the case?
Sure. So Global Climate and Health Alliance is an alliance around 160 health professional bodies around the world, and these are really sort of very mainstream health bodies. You know, we started out initially sort of about 10 years ago working with groups that were sort of interested in, you know, environmental health already, I think. And what we've seen over the last sort of 5 years is really sort of the very credible, the very mainstream public health and medical bodies start to come to the table. The Alliance now works very closely with the World Medical Association, with the Royal Australasian College of Physicians, with the British Medical Association. And I think that the shift that we've seen recently has been, this is no longer something where there's sort of the fringes of the health profession involved. This is now something where increasingly it's almost sort of starting to be perceived as sort of, you know, the heart of something that the public health profession is engaged in. We're not quite there yet, and there's still a lot of work to go. What we've seen in the past, when the medical and broader health community really engages on an issue like this that they care about, they have the potential to move mountains. They have the potential to really sort of shift public opinion, to drive policy. And that, I think, is why the Global Climate and Health Alliance exists. I think it's why Physicians for Social Responsibility exists, is to try and sort of tap into and mobilize that sort of almost moral authority that the health profession brings with it when it's talking about these sorts of things, not from a perspective of the political left or the political right, but from a perspective of what's good for population and patient health. And I think we're really starting to see that sort of change and start to ramp up.
Yeah, that's really true, mate. And I'm wondering, perhaps later we can get some insight into how you think medical practitioners and even some of our climate trackers can help sway that public opinion and really can help kind of push some really positive policy. But I want to touch on something that Catherine mentioned before, and it's not the hat that you said you're wearing, although you're obviously not wearing a hat right now. But you mentioned that you were pretty heavily involved in the Lancet report. Now, those of you not in kind of medical journal circles, my understanding is that that's pretty weighty medical journal and has, a very, very high level of respect within the medical field. But could you perhaps explain kind of how important that medical journal is and just what that Lancet report is talking about to some of those who might not have read yet?
Sure. So I mean, the Lancet as a medical journal is really sort of our equivalent of Nature or Science. science in sort of, you know, the environmental or climate sort of world. It is, I think, arguably the most influential medical journal in the world, and certainly anyone that's trained in medicine or in sort of health will instantly recognize the formatting and the style that the Lancet sort of writes in. It has one of the largest circulations of sort of, you know, medical journals worldwide. So this commission, it was published on the 23rd of June, about a month ago, although it feels much longer. And what it was a sort of a very large, it was the result of a research collaboration that had been going on between 15 institutions, mainly across Europe and China, and some 47 authors. Really sort of starting from the perspective of re-examining the impacts of health on climate change, some of those negative threats for the first chapter, but then the next 4 chapters of the report spent much of its time trying to sort of look at what the response to climate change looked like, and not necessarily the response to climate change that we've seen in the IPCC reports or in the IEA reports, but more looking at the response to climate change insofar as it protected and promoted public health. And that was what I think was new about this. So the commission had its climate scientists, we had development experts, we had economists, energy experts, political scientists, but importantly, scattered throughout every chapter were health professionals, public health professionals, who were able to look at this with almost sort of fresh eyes and sort of reinterpret a lot of the evidence as a medical professional would do. Some of the key messages I think that came out of the commission, firstly from our first chapter, was that the threat had been systemically underestimated, and that in fact it looked as though climate change had the potential to undermine the last half-century of gains in public health. And these gains that we're talking about, or the ability to undermine it, is not just in low and middle income countries, it's in low, middle, and high income countries. And this is really something that's quite alarming and quite interesting that health brings, is that health almost sort of localizes climate change. It sort of moves it away from the polar bear, you know, a long way away, or from sort of the drought somewhere in Africa. Yes, all of those impacts are happening, but they're also having very, very local impacts in the United States or in Australia, where I am at the moment, and really all over the world. And that's an important sort of change, I think, that we see when we start to talk about climate change from the health perspective. So the commission started by talking about climate change as a threat, but very, very quickly moved on to the next 4 chapters, which really tried to build the case, and I think successfully built the case, that responding to climate change, the public health response to climate change over the next half century, could potentially be one of the biggest global health opportunities of the 21st century. And this is because a lot of what we want to do to respond to climate change is really just common sense public health intervention. It's all the sorts of things that we want to do anyway. We want to clean up the air, we want to shut down coal-fired power plants, and reduce at the same time cardiovascular disease and respiratory disease for local populations. We want to encourage active transport, walking and cycling, rather than building cities around cars or it's the fossil fuel powered vehicles. We want to make sure that we're supporting, engaging, and strengthening public health systems. One of the best things you can do from an adaptation perspective to respond to minimize the health risks of climate change is strengthen your public health system. Make sure that your health system acts as an anchor of community resilience in the event of a natural disaster. The health system, the hospital, is the last thing you need to have standing in the event of a multi-hit scenario. And so all of these sorts of things, I suppose, are sort of key recommendations that come from the Commission that lead it to the conclusion that it could potentially, responding to climate change could potentially be the biggest global health opportunity. And from that perspective, I mean, we launched about a month ago. Already, the Commission has had some 2.7 million downloads. So it's now already the Lancet's most downloaded publication. In terms of medical sort of journals, it's about the most successful that has sort of existed ever at its age, so at sort of 1 month out. We had something like 1,900 unique stories written on the Commission, and then you know, if you take the non-unique stories, that number goes up into sort of the 15 to 20,000s. And I think the statistic that we're most proud of is that for a number of hours in a few different countries we were trending on Twitter, which, I mean, I'm not a big sort of Twitter follower, so I don't really get what that means, but I do know that we were trending above Taylor Swift and below Batman. So for me to sort of be in the same realm as either of those two is you know, you're doing all right in sort of from a climate change perspective at least. So that was the commission. We launched about a month ago. We're turning into a new countdown for climate action, which is going to be basically another research collaboration of very, very high-powered, credible academic centers from a health perspective that are going to report on progress in health and climate change every year for the next 15 years, and really try and look at seeing how science and academics from a public health perspective can hold governments and politics to account in terms of the kinds of things that we demanded in the Commission's first report.
Wow, well, for you to say that climate change is the biggest health threat, but also the biggest health opportunity of the 21st century, it's taken me a little while to get my head around, but it's definitely something that I can understand with the way you're saying it. My flatmate actually is a doctor himself and an epidemiologist, and kind of has always talked to me about the need to just kind of deal with that fundamental kind of public health, you know, and it sounds like a lot of the things that you're talking about that could be potential mitigation and adaptation strategies, you know, really that foundational, how do we get kind of those long-term chronic illnesses out of our systems and out of our kind of, you know, general population. And that's kind of really interesting to see how that combines itself. And just for your own kind of understanding, you do kind of deal with pretty heavy fact-based kind of knowledge uptakes on a daily basis, but trending on Twitter above Taylor Swift is almost winning a Nobel Prize in the Twitter world. It's not as good as maybe a Fields Medal, but it definitely is up there with like a short-term prize. Maybe one of the prizes, something that people don't know about that well. It's not a Peace Prize, but it's definitely up there with a worthy accomplishment for the CV if you ever do want to go into communications field later on. I'm wondering though, this has been amazing to hear about, but we haven't heard from any of our youth on the call, and I want to try and bring them in because one of our younger people, obviously looking a lot younger than her CV or her kind of accomplishments are, is from the Philippines, Anjali, and Anjali, you are actually a young doctor in the Philippines, and you've kind of in a few recent articles you've described some of the health impacts of climate change going on right now. So not even kind of looking into the future, you see some things happening right now that are really concerning.
Yes.
Yeah.
So like the youth. Okay, I'm echoing. Okay, that's good. So yeah, like the usual ones: respiratory diseases from air pollution, obesity from the lack of walkability of cities. There are just a lot. But basically, one thing that I think people are forgetting is the mental health of the victims of disaster. So I'm doing fieldwork now in the city most hit by Typhoon Haiyan or Typhoon Yolanda, a Category 5 super typhoon, like one of the worst that has hit the Earth in the last century. And people there are basically like the focus of the government and everyone else, NGOs, is more physical rehabilitation. There's a lack of attention on mental health of the victims. And this is one thing that we tend to forget, that is not being highlighted much, maybe because of the stigma of people. And we don't realize that in the future, when climate change, for example, has gotten the worst of us, in the end, it replicates, it simulates a disaster scenario. So like there's an evolving field also right now called eco-psychology. Like it's one thing that we should learn how to appreciate the earth that we live in now and just basically live with the basics, because like from these victims, many of them actually don't want to live anymore because they lost everything that they had, their whole families, everything. And then, so from them you could get the insight that what's really important in life is the social networks, the relations we have, and all these things that we have that this materialistic consumerism society that is promoting is really nothing. It's all superficial. So it's one thing also that we have to forward, the psychology, the paradigm shift that we have to move out from this materialistic society and move and live with a basic essence of like in life of what makes us happy. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, and I'm really, really sorry to hear about some of the long-term impacts of Typhoon Haiyan. I remember when it hit and being kind of absolutely mortified at the short-term impact, but it kind of brings back some horrible memories that, thinking about the fact that now, you know, there are a whole lot of people who are still dealing with the impact of it. And thank you for sharing, and I really kind of commend you in the work that you're doing, and hope that if there's anything we can do as climate trackers to support that work, that feel free to ask, and we should be there for you, ready to support it. I am kind of also interested, recently you've talked about heat stress in the Philippines, and you recently had, I guess, a more pleasant experience of how good it can be to step away from, I guess, of the medical publishing and write about heat stress in the popular media. Could you kind of just explain some of the things that you describe in your article?
Yes. So nowadays, like with the increasing global temperature that we have, so heat waves have become more common. So even if in the Philippines it's a tropical country and it's pretty hot there, it has still become more frequent in the sense that there are already around 5 to 10 Filipinos getting heat-related illnesses per day, and actually these are just the ones recorded. And Philippines being a developing country, there's really a huge gap in database management and keeping records of these stuff. So yeah, so there are many getting heat stroke, nausea, other different symptoms related to heat, and it's not being given much attention. So like in the Philippines being listed as one of the most vulnerable countries, there's not much effort being put to mitigation measures, to smart measures. It's all on about what's simple for them to do, like physical preventative structures. You know, it's not this collaborative, smart, intelligent solution. So they really tend to forget that. And I have this friend of mine who's from Nigeria. She asked me, like, you have these extreme temperatures, droughts, typhoons so often. Like we have one major typhoon, at least one per month. And she was like, how do you manage with the Philippines being so vulnerable and with you guys not getting enough help from funding to technology to knowledge exchange? So she's wondering, how do we get to survive? So there, and these days, like, it's really hot in the Philippines. It could get up to like 38 degrees Celsius during the summer especially. And people are getting used to it, but they don't know that there are also others who have gotten extreme harmful like health effects from this. So like especially the elderly, the young, and also those who are chronically ill, they're more prone to the effects of these heat waves. And the Climate Council recently actually released this study that for the past 3 decades, yeah, so the number of heat waves have increased like 100%. So from the 1950s to the 1980s, it has only been around 0.1 to 0.2%, and then now it's already 10%. So you could see the 100 times increase. And also, like, there are recent studies that shows that heat waves result to like direct impact include like skin tumors, for example, becoming more common, and on indirect impact is neurodegenerative diseases. So these different heat-related illnesses, they are evolving, they're expanding, all because like they're all related to global warming, and these could actually get worse in urban cities, with the urban heat island effect, with the lots of concrete that we're having from buildings and the loss of greenery. So we could imagine how the impacts could be worse. And like nowadays, most of what is being promoted are Band-Aid solutions. So people are being taught to drink more water, which is actually, like if you think of it in the long run, especially in areas where there's water crisis, you know, it's a vicious cycle. And then also like others, like cooling centers are built up. So like the use of AC too, like it leads to increased greenhouse gas emissions, which in turn would warm the planet. So then that would also lead to more heat-related illnesses. So really, like, we have to have smart measures, like more than just linearly thinking, like simplistic measures to address these. And I believe that, well, I'm from this program, a transdisciplinary program on sustainability science, and here, like, I have classmates who are engineers, architects, economists. We're all working together, and it's really nice, you know, how you think of solutions because you're all collaborating, you're from different fields. It's challenging because you have different languages, so from like medical jargon versus the other professions, but it's really efficient. And how I wish like this could be more possible, like outside in the real world, outside just the academia. So collaborations between researchers and like the media, and also like so we could reach more people and actually come up with better solutions.
Well, I think actually that there are a lot of people working on some of these solutions, and I'd love to cross out to Nick, who has kind of through his network has developed one particular solution which I'm really interested in. It's a program that I'm not sure if you really label it, but your 2020 Healthcare Challenge. Nick, what's all that about? And is it one of these solutions like Anjali's talking that kind of brings a lot of people together to try and find these solutions for the 21st century that Catherine was talking about?
Sure. So, I mean, the 2020 is an initiative of one of the Alliance's founding members, Healthcare Without Harm, and what they're effectively looking at doing is engaging directly with health systems, with hospitals, health facilities all around the world, trying to have a conversation with them about what these sort of centers of otherwise healing can do to, at the same time as improving public health and patient care, also reduce the impact that they're having on the environment. As it turns out, the two go hand in hand, and a lot of things you'd like to do to strengthen patient care and sort of cost contain and reduce costs are actually often quite good for climate change and for the environment. At a broader level, the 2020 Healthcare Challenge fits within a new campaign that the Global Climate and Health Alliance and the World Health Organization are about to launch in about 14 days, in about 2 weeks, called Our Climate, Our Health. And what this campaign is looking to do is I think sort of along the lines of what you're talking about, Anjali, in terms of really trying to bring together otherwise very disparate parts of the health sector. So we're engaging directly with health systems through Healthcare Without Harm. We're engaging with the global health community through the World Health Organization, with professional bodies through groups like the World Medical Association, the International Council of Nurses, or the World Federation of Public Health Associations, through individual health professionals, and through the private sector as well. And these are. I mean, it might sound as though, you know, despite the fact that they're all sort of health groups, these are groups that don't always spend much time or spend very little time talking to one another. And so what this campaign is trying to do is, I suppose, bring each of these different aspects of the health sector together, whether they're private or public or global health or NGOs or professional associations, and really almost sort of collect statements and signatories of support over the next few months, so that we can come together and we can almost sort of arrive in Paris on the 5th of December. There's going to be a whole range of one-day sort of conferences for each of these different parts of the health system on the 5th of December. Almost arrive there and sort of say in about as declarative a fashion as we can that the public health community, I think, or the global health community has arrived. And so for us, this is a bit of a transformative moment, and we've seen so far incredibly strong engagement from really sort of very high up in otherwise normally very conservative public health groups. I think I said before, you know, these sorts of groups, they're groups that are moved by evidence. They're sort of professional bodies that are very slow to react. But when they do react, they move with the full weight of you know what is often, I think, a fairly well considered profession in society. And so over the next few months, but then sort of almost amplifying up to early December, that's what we're going to see. I think, or I hope, from the health profession. The 2020 Healthcare Challenge forms an integral part of that, insofar as they are occupying sort of the formal health system component of that. But there's a much broader sort of spectrum that will build into to try and sort of bring, I suppose, the whole profession there, both physically and in spirit, in Paris in the middle of the week.
That's awesome to hear, and mate, as a fellow Australian, I just wish you the best of luck with all that. It sounds like you're really kind of getting close to what Anjali was saying before, and perhaps, Anjali, I hope this is a good example of one of the things that you're looking for, and may even kind of help think about or help partner with some of the work you're doing. Nick, I understand you have to leave us now, but thank you so much for joining with us, and your insight's been amazing. Congratulations on the Lancet report and all the work that's going on, and to everyone else watching, if you want to get in contact with Nick, if you had any questions on Nick, feel free to tweet at @DrNegotiator. Feel free to use the hashtags or the Google page or the Facebook group, and we'll pass those on to Nick directly, and we'll see if he can give you a better answer, perhaps in the next kind of, maybe next week, as he might take some time over the weekend to kind of enjoy some of the resting effects and the respiration of the weekend. I'm sure it's an important medical term for resting on the weekend. Anyway, thanks, Nick, and it's been a pleasure.
Great, thank you very much. See ya.
There's obviously one person that we haven't gone to yet, and she's been sitting patiently there from Kingston, Jamaica, and she's also kind of been alerting me recently of some really amazing advocacy campaigns that she's been running, or I guess being run in Jamaica, but they've also been telling me that Jamaica's been feeling some heat stress as well. So, Nalinia, I'm wondering if I could cross to you now and maybe explain what's going on in Jamaica, and then kind of walk us through this advocacy campaign that you're planning, and hopefully, you know, maybe this is a campaign that others can copy in their own kind of regions. Just worry that you're on move, that's all.
Can you hear me now? Perfect. I was saying thank you for this opportunity, because it's actually very funny that people think that because Jamaica is such a small island and the Caribbean in itself is so small that we don't really feel the impacts of climate change and we are okay on our own. But the irony of it is that because even though we as a small nation do not contribute largely to greenhouse gas emissions, because we're so small, we are going to be feeling the effects of climate change a lot more than the larger nations. So in this instance, we are very vulnerable to climate change, and what we have seen is that we're very impacted on the health sector. As Catherine had said earlier, in terms of drought, water security, and the increase of vectors, Jamaica is currently experiencing a lot of that. And if you see, if you probably have seen in the news, other Caribbean islands such as Trinidad and Barbados and St. Lucia, they're being flooded away right now, because what's happening is that with climate change, you have an intensity of these disasters. So you're even having longer periods of drought and small periods of rainfall, or you have the opposite way. For Jamaica right now, we're actually having an extended period of drought. And our dry season has extended beyond its time, and they're saying that the El Nino effect will actually continue into next year and will actually be worse. And how this is being linked to health in Jamaica is that, one, of course, our water sector is being greatly impacted. And the lack of water in Jamaica has greatly affected us in that we are not having access to clean, potable water. So our health facilities are being greatly affected. So this is leading to increases in cases of gastroenteritis in small children. It's leading to health and sanitary problems in basic schools and just out of the workplace. A lot of diseases are being spread and are coming up that haven't been there since years ago, just because of the lack of water to adequately deal with this issue. In addition, just as in terms of nutrition, hydrating yourself, a lot of people are having health issues just because of dehydration and the ability to hydrate themselves. Our major dam in Jamaica is below 30%, and they actually said we only have about 15 days left of water if we were supposed to run this continuously. So we're having water shortages to a larger extent, and this is really greatly impacting our health. When you look at the agricultural sector in terms of drought, we're having to import a lot of foods, or grown provisions such as yam and cassava and all these nutritional foods. We have to be, we don't have a deficit of them, of course, and it's really limiting our ability to be productive in society. A big impact as well in regards to health is a recent chikungunya epidemic that happened in Jamaica last year. From about, I think last year September, we actually had, it was caused by a mosquito, and it's transmitted via the mosquito. So what happened is that over 30 million man-hours were lost last year in the business sector because everybody was sick. And this increase of vector-borne diseases have been linked to climate change in that because of Jamaica and our inability to have, for example, proper drainage systems, when we do have rainfall, it is very intense because of climate change in terms of we're getting these intense periods for shorter times, and then it leads to vector-borne diseases because of our lack of drainage, and then it transmits, it facilitates and encourages vectors to proliferate, and then we have these health issues coming here, and then we don't have the health facilities to deal with it as it comes. So it has been really a health issue. I mean, ZIKV is another mosquito-borne disease that is really coming into the Caribbean now, and we're trying our best to mitigate against it and to find out what best can we do. So we're putting things out there, we're publishing, have better drainage and doing all these things that we can to effectively reduce it. So it is a problem, and we're trying our best to work with what we have and to really put in, like, for example, rainwater harvesting that will really tackle these health issues because it's a big problem.
For sure, and I think we've been receiving some questions about some policy alternatives that maybe can help with some of these problems. I understand you're also kind of about to start a bit of a march across Jamaica, and
right.
That's going to be one of the key elements of that.
Okay, so we're in terms of, because we are trying to do something now. We want to go beyond the literature, beyond the science, beyond just the talk, because you're seeing it in every newspaper, you're seeing it in every observer, but nothing is being done. So I'm actually the project lead for we're hoping to be the largest march in the Caribbean and the first in Jamaica. This is modeled after the Great March that happened in New York last year, September. They had over 400,000 participants. And we're hoping to model that behavior, that entire concept in Jamaica. So we're going beyond the words and the literature and the science and the concept, oh, this is what climate change is, to bring it down to a personal level and to really engage individuals from babies to toddlers to youth to school students to even grandparents to the effects of climate change. How does climate change affect you as the individual? And it's actually done under the theme of health and wellness. So we figured that if we can actually sensitize ordinary individuals to the effects of climate change as to how it affects them on a personal level, if I continue to burn garbage in my backyard and the monoxide that is being produced, and if I'm continuing to waste water, how will this affect me as an individual, and how will it affect me in terms of health? My well-being, my children, my future generations. So we're trying to bring it down to a personal level so that we can we're trying to go with a different approach. You know, the science and the literature is always there, and it clearly hasn't had the effect that we want it to have. So maybe if we can engage people in a different way from all over the Caribbean, the diaspora, even internationally, to get people to be truly involved in the issues of climate change on a personal level, we would love to. We're hoping that that's the effect and the result that we'll get from it.
Definitely, and that is exciting for one. I can definitely, I really hope that you do get those numbers that you're hoping for, and you're able to even more so connect with communities around Jamaica. And I don't mean to say this in any way offensively, but I am guessing that that walk might even be more fun and more musical than the one that happened in New York. So,
oh, definitely.
Jealous of potentially what that could be. So if you are around Jamaica, if you are watching from across the Caribbean, you might want to get in touch with Nalini and join what could be not only a really important but quite a fun march. I'm now going to kind of turn to some of the questions that we've been receiving, and I'm going to warn you to some of our participants. These questions aren't as easy as you might think. We've got some pretty kind of engaged climate trackers watching online right now, and some of them have some pretty hard-hitting questions. So I hope you're ready for this. And the first one I'm going to direct towards Catherine. It's from one of our trackers, Anthony Agbon Giahui. And Anthony, I hope I've got that right. I've probably not, but your question is that what Catherine said about the relationship between climate change and extreme events like drought, flooding, air pollution, etc. is correct. But not all human health conditions or sicknesses are attributed to climate change. And I think that question might be leaning towards something in the lines of, are we attributing more diseases towards climate change than we should be?
That's an excellent question, and I more easily quote the information from the United States called the National Climate Assessment. And here in the United States, I don't think the damages have been as great as they are in the Philippines or in Jamaica. However, we are already seeing in many parts of the United States a 33% increase in the number of extreme low-flow water days due to climate change. This is from the National Climate Assessment. You can find this data online. The number of extreme precipitation events across our country have gone up by 29%. So again, it's worse in areas than others, but it is definitely documented to be part of climate change. The spread of Lyme disease, epidemic levels in Wisconsin, movement of dust storms that moves coccidiomycosis or coccidiomyoides fungus to new areas, the increased rates of fires. There's 300 fires going on in Alaska because of the drought there. This directly impacts health. I don't want to live downwind from a huge wildfire. Now, are all droughts attributable to climate change? Of course not. But what we're seeing is a marked increase in percentage of the rates of these types of events.
Well, that answers your question, and Catherine, I think you did a pretty good job in answering what was a difficult, and we have another one that I might see if Catherine, you might want to lead on, and potentially Leo or Nalini, you can definitely kind of follow up with, and the question is relating to policy responses. Now, we've heard that Nick and his group are dealing with a lot of potential solutions that involve practitioners, and we've heard kind of from Anjali that what we need is these responses to these problems. But Catherine, have you come up or come across any really positive policy responses to some of these these climate change on health, or are there suggestions out there that you'd like to see forwarded by policymakers around the world?
Well, I think that we can take from the Lancet Commission report that, and in every single report that's come out, is that we need policy change that reduces the amount of fossil fuel burning that we're doing. So we need to leave it in the ground. And the Lancet clearly states, as have many other reports, that technological resources are already available. We have wind power, we have solar power, we have geothermal, we have heat pumps, we have the technology to reduce the burning of fossil fuel right now. The economics are such that it makes sense to make these changes because for two reasons. One is that some of them are less expensive than continuing to burn fossil fuels, both in terms of actual technology costs, but also in terms of the $333 million a year that we spend in this country that are direct health impacts of coal. So the economics of burning fossil fuels are such that it makes sense to switch. It makes sense for our health. So, you know, every country is going to have a different response. Every area of the United States has a different mix of solutions that will be necessary, but we have to get off fossil fuels. And the Lancet report, IPCC, and many others say that one of the best mechanisms is by putting a price on carbon pollution. And by putting a price on carbon pollution, you bring to bear market pressures to increase healthy, safe energy and decrease the amount of fossil fuels that are going to be burned. So I think that overall is the biggest solution. I think transportation is a little bit more difficult, but I'll leave it there.
It's interesting you say that because I would have thought that you would have immediately gone for the adaptation angle and maybe kind of a health policy perspective, but you went straight for the mitigation. You went straight for the, you know, climate change is the cause of these health impacts, and we need to stop climate change. You know, we need to stop the root cause of this disease in a way, as opposed to kind of then having to deal with the symptoms, if you like. I hope I'm dealing out those medical metaphors properly. I know that I'm in a crowd that won't give me any sympathy if I'm not. So I really hope I am, and please take mercy if I'm not.
Well, that's true, and in some communities that don't get it, the legislators just, for whatever reason, because of all the false information put out there, just like the tobacco industry put out a lot of information saying tobacco smoking is not bad for your health. Communities like that are more likely to respond to, oh, the sea level is rising and we need to manage that. And so we need to adapt to it. We need to move our schools and our water treatment plants to higher ground. And through that, then they can be educated and moved to the idea that we can be more self-sustaining if we have solar panels on our roof. We can be more self-sustaining. The 27% of farmers in Iowa that get paid to have wind turbines on their land, they're not going to give those up. That's a benefit to the state of Iowa. So adaptation, it has to happen as well, but we can't adapt our way out of this problem. We have to really deal with the cause.
Sure, because, you know, Nick was saying, for example, that there are some great solutions out there, but I guess it's going to have to be, and all of you are going to have to be most innovative doctors the world has ever seen if you're going to keep dealing with the escalating impacts of ongoing climate change. So I think you're definitely right, and you know, you're definitely kind of hitting the nail on the head that in order to be able to thrive in what you've described as the greatest health opportunity of the 21st century, you know, we really have to deal with the greatest threat of the 21st century, which is climate change, and which is particularly the health impacts of climate change. Now, Anjali and Nalini, have you had a chance to think of maybe some policy options that you've seen in your own countries? We'll start with Anjali, and then we might go to Nalini afterwards.
Okay. Basically, I want to go beyond the question. Like, in the Philippines, we have UN-acclaimed laws addressing climate change. But then, in the end, they just remain on paper, and they're never put into practice. So it's always the implementation and the monitoring and evaluation that never happens in our country. Like what Catherine said, like more of these measures, like incentives for decentralizing sources of energy, carbon tax, banks giving more loans for risky projects, these environmental projects. So we need more of these, and like nowadays we have to think more systemically and systematically, in the sense that we shouldn't just look at it as climate change and health, actually, and by clusters like climate change and energy. We should think of how all these interact with each other, because they do. And actually, like it's kind of like what I'm advocating. I feel like what we're saying, that we should protect the earth, we should minimize climate change in order to promote proper human health or well-being. I find it like the most selfish and probably the most effective way of convincing people now. But I hope that we could evolve like beyond that. I got to encounter these indigenous people in an area in the Philippines. When they were told that we are environmentalists, they couldn't grasp the meaning of the term, like why such a term exists in the first place. Because for them, it's natural, it's innate, it's an obligation that everyone has to do. Like nobody could claim that he or she is an environmentalist, because everyone is doing it. It's common sense for them. So I hope that we could go to this level, and actually do our part in any way that we can. Basically, that's it.
Definitely, and that's got some fundamental aspects to it that can give us all some pause for thought. Nalini, I might give you a last kind of chance to jump in on this. Have you seen any kind of positive policies in the Caribbean that you think are worth pushing forward, or do you have ideas of your own that you'd like to see implemented?
Well, Chris, the thing is that, as I said, Jamaica as a small island has little contribution to the overall global scale of carbon emissions and to climate change. But we have acknowledged that we are very vulnerable as an island, and we will feel the impacts of climate change a lot. So, you see it's happening every day, where they're publishing articles every day in the newspaper. It's becoming a nationwide thing. So things are in place. So, we're getting bank loans. We're having renewable energy bank loans for solar panels. They're pushing these measures a lot. What I do think is lacking, though, is the engagement and the collaboration between the ministries. So even though the information is out there and they are sensitizing people to it, which is a good thing and the first step that is needed, I think what is needed is priority for climate change and very stringent for stronger partnerships with the public-private partnerships, so that the ministries can really engage with the private sector. Because unfortunately in Jamaica, engaging the private sector is our biggest challenge. It's more about the bottom line versus being environmentally aware and sensitized. So I believe that if the government, for example, or policies can be in place that really aims to integrate the private sector into decision making, into engaging them into the benefits of, the economic benefits of adapting and adopting climate change policies, I think we could really come together as a Caribbean entity and really fight or mitigate against this impact that will really affect us even more. You know, instead of just, it's beyond the literature, it's beyond do this, do that, and it's more, this is what we need to do, this is a priority. And I believe if the ministry and if the government makes it a priority and makes it something, a necessary measure to put in place, then everybody else would see this and follow likewise. So it really is about public-private partnership and engaging people to the fact that this is not just a good thing, or this is not just be a good person out of goodwill. It's, we have to do this. This is no mandatory, and we need to put this in place to protect ourselves, our health, our wellness, and Jamaica and the Caribbean as a whole.
Definitely, and I think I'm going to pass to Josh very quickly for some of our ideas on how we can better engage people. But Nalini, you have a bit of a comment that's been passed our way from one of your colleagues, I guess, in the Caribbean. We have a tracker from Puerto Rico who wanted to kind of update everyone on the drought that they're facing in Puerto Rico. And she says that now we have water every 60 hours, and we only have water for 24 hours at a time. So basically they get water one day in every 3. And that the dengue season has come earlier this year because all of the water that people are saving at their homes is kind of linking to the dengue season coming earlier. So this is kind of, I guess, somewhat of that worst case scenario that Catherine, you were talking about before, in terms of the way these health impacts can kind of, you know, amplify off each other. I think that's definitely you know, room for thought to think about how we can kind of take some of these ideas and use them as key, I guess, points to think about, but also key points to act on. And in terms of that acting and in terms of that engagement, I'd like to pass now to Josh, who's got a bit of an announcement, especially for those watching who are part of our Climate Tracker team and who are looking to kind of engage people around climate change and health, especially in the short-term future.
Thanks, Chris. Hello, everyone. That was really insightful and a little bit scary, or heavy at least, and inspiring to see that everybody on this panel not only understands these issues and at such a deep level, but they're all taking action to address the issues and bring out these solutions. So I want to encourage everybody who is watching to join us in doing the same. So this was a great opportunity to dig into the issues. We heard from some experts, and starting this coming week, the last days of July, as well as the first week of August, we're hosting our second global call for climate action. In that call, this is the second of the year. We're asking you to share what you've learned, share your passion. So on this call, we heard about how climate issues could not be more personal. They get to the very heart of being a person, our health and well-being. They affect us on an individual level and on a community level, you know, as well as a global level. We have some materials up on the Adopt a Negotiator website, and we'll continue to add resources for you to use as you try and flesh out your ideas in writing. You can find those materials just by going to adoptanegotiator.org, or go directly to our Call for Climate Action page, adoptanegotiator.org/call-for-climate will get you there. We've got a few resources. We'll have a link to this webinar. We're working on a few other tools that'll help you bring this story to life, as well as the other topic which we hosted a webinar earlier on, which is focused on the end of the fossil fuel era and the age of renewables, the transition that's underway. So please help us bring this message to the masses, publics you want to engage. Try and put pressure on decision makers. Get your ideas, these ideas that you've heard here today, into blogs, into newspapers, into radio shows, into YouTube videos. Every way you can get the word out, and the bigger the audience, I think, the better. We see some great examples. So check it out. Join us on this next round. We'll send additional ideas to you over email if you're signed up. on our Climate Tracker Network email listserv. And maybe we've gone way over for these guests, so I really appreciate you guys having stuck with us in spite of the technical difficulties to share your work. We'll just pass it to each of you. Last closing words, a sentence or two that you'd like to leave with our network, who hopefully will take this message to the masses in this next global call for climate action, writing their story for newspapers and blogs. Maybe Anjali, we can start with you. Oh, we got you on mute here. Sorry. Anjali, I think we can't hear you. Can you?
Oh, sorry. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Perfect. Perfect.
Okay, great, great. Okay. So one or two lines. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's that we have to realize that the Earth is gonna continue existing, evolving, without us. So beyond just thinking of ourselves, I don't know, I hope that we do more out of, protecting the Earth beyond just for ourselves, for our own health. Basically, that's it. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Nalini, do you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to, put it out there, let's do something, let's go beyond the words, let's just go beyond just talking about it, let's actually do something, let's put it in, let's realize that it goes beyond the literature, the scientists, the environmentalists, it goes beyond that, it affects us personally, and if we want to protect ourselves or future generations and the world that we live in that has really protected us and supplied us with everything that we needed to be here, let's just do as much as we can in our capacity, and let's be our own little leader. Let's do something.
Thank you. Powerful words. I agree. I'm sure everybody else does as well. Catherine, can we go to you?
Yes, let me leave you with a sense of hope. We have many hospitals and clinic systems in the United States that are doing the right thing. There's one hospital system in Wisconsin that, as of the end of last year, is 100% on renewable energy. Through energy efficiency, through solar panels, through wind purchases, through working with their local brewery and capturing methane. All of these things can be done, are being done, and should inspire us to take more action. So tell positive stories, keep it local, tell personal stories. Those are the ways to reach people in your area. Thanks.
So there you've heard it from Jamaica, you've heard it from Tampa, you've heard it from Manila in the Philippines, and you've also heard it from Australia and San Francisco. And I'm joining you from Singapore. So you literally have people all around the world kind of imploring you to take this on. Climate change is, as we've heard from Nick and Catherine, potentially the greatest health threat of the 21st century, but as we just heard again, could potentially be the greatest health opportunity. As Nick said, dealing with some of the co-benefits of health and climate change at the same time could take us a long way to not only solving climate change, but also solving health problems. And I think there's some very kind of simple examples that he gave, like riding bicycles, which deals with kind of obesity levels and high blood pressure, but also kind of potentially deals with your personal emissions in driving cars, but all the way up to policy level, kind of high level governmental systematic policy changes, not only to kind of make sure we don't continue to emit carbon dioxide and other fossil fuels, but also deal with some of the health impacts but in a way that doesn't take away from our obligation to make sure that climate change stops now, because otherwise, as I mentioned before, our doctors are going to be pushed even further to the limit as they continue to deal with these spiraling effects of climate change. Not only the short-term effects that we're seeing now in the Caribbean, or the amplifying effects that I mentioned in Puerto Rico right now, but also the effects that Anjali was talking about in terms of the long-term traumatic influences that climate change events can have, whether they are large storms, heat stress, or any kind of other climate-related disasters. So I know we haven't been able to answer all your questions, but please rest assured we will get to those questions. Put your questions up on the Facebook group that we've set up, Climate Tracker 2015. Use the hashtag Climate Tracker or the hashtag Call for Climate, and ask your questions on the Google Hangout page. We will get to them. And if you do have questions for Anjali or for Nalini or Nick or Catherine or anyone who might be in their networks, please feel free to pass them on, and we will direct these celebrity guests to your questions, and hopefully they'll be able to get to them within their busy schedules. Thank you again for joining us, and like Josh mentioned, we are now opening our second call for climate action. Get out your pens, get your keys, get your fingers stretched for your keyboards, because now is the time to write, people. It's time to get on the keyboards. It's time to get onto the Lancet report. It's time to look up Catherine's organization. It's time to look up Anjali's report. Time to research about what's going in Jamaica, and time to get on the keyboards and punch out those words, punch out those messages, and make this message ring out throughout your countries, because this is what we're all about. And I've seen some amazing results even from our first call for climate. We had not only the number of articles that kind of got produced, but the impact that they had has been amazing. We've had some of our climate trackers go on to become regular columnists as a result in the Huffington Post, or in Canada in the Independent. We've had some of our climate trackers shared thousands of times and had their messages reverberated throughout their public. And now is your chance. Now is your chance to get out there, to write your article, and to join in the call for climate. And you can write, as we mentioned, an article either about renewable energy or an article about this threat and opportunity that climate change offers in terms of health. Thank you, everyone. Thank you especially to our speakers. And let's get writing, and let's get to work. See you later.